Hi guys, here is another tutorial from our online textbook. This one covers imagery. Imagery is something you're going to come across quite a bit in literature, whether it's prose in a chapter book or it's poetry. So this tutorial focuses just on exactly why authors use imagery and how to identify it.
Suppose you are reading a story about a character named John. The writer tells you John has a cough that sounds like a dog's bark. The writer could have simply written, John had a bad cough. Instead, the writer used imagery to describe the sound more precisely. Imagery is language that helps a reader imagine what the writer is describing more clearly. Writers create imagery by using sensory details, words and phrases that appeal to the senses of sight, smell, touch, hearing, or taste. Writers use imagery to unlock a reader's memory of a specific experience. Imagery can use sensory details that appeal to one sense or to several at the same time. Click the words for examples of sensory details in description.
The glowing white face of the full moon shone on us. So these details appeal to our sense of sight. When they say glowing and white, we can really see that bright moon in the sky. The shiny red berry turned to tart juice with each bite. So this description has a visual image, but it also appeals to our sense of taste. And if you think about it, you might have noticed that as you read this, your mouth just watered a little bit. The blast drowned out our voices as red and blue light filled the skies. So this appeals to our sense of hearing. We can hear that blast of fireworks. The golden pie crust smelled sweet and buttery. Definitely can smell that pie with that description. And last one. The lightning storm arrived with a blinding flash and a long roll of thunder that shook the house. So we could see that blinding flash, and then we could hear that slow thunder and feel the shaking of it. So definitely some touch with the shake.
As you now know, sensory details can appeal to your senses of sight, hearing, taste, touch, or smell. Which sense do the details in each sentence appeal to? Drag the correct sense to each sentence.
Okay, so let's see if we get this right. First example says, the rich, buttery chocolate practically melted in her mouth. If you were thinking taste, you were correct. Next one. The humid air reeked of wet dirt and burning wood. If you're thinking smell, right again. Sandpaper-like grit stuck to the grimy window pane. You can really see that, so maybe it's sight. Nope. I never get all of these right. Have you noticed this yet? Oh, when you have sandpaper-like grit, I wonder if they imagine us that we can just feel that if we touch the window. I wouldn't touch that window. You know me and germs. There we go, it's touch. The window made a pitiful screeching noise when it was opened. Oh, screeching noise, that's my clue that I can just hear it.
You probably noticed that most imagery is at least partially visual. However, it is just as important to understand imagery that appeals to other senses. Drag and drop the sentences that contain non-visual imagery into the answer box below.
So non-visual means we can't see. We're going to use something else besides sight. So I'll read these 5 and then give a few seconds for you to think about it before I drag them over. The room stinks like a perfume factory. Her voice sounds like fingernails on a chalkboard. The stars were brilliant jewels in a black velvet sky. She was frightened. I felt a pins and needles sensation in my left foot. Okay, if you were thinking this one, you were correct. That uses the sense of smell. Sounds is kind of a clue that we can hear that. Yep. And then there's one more. It's the very bottom one. Felt, feeling, that would be touch.
When analyzing the imagery in a piece of writing, ask yourself, what senses did the details in this passage appeal to? Which words or phrases triggered those senses? The imagery in this passage appeals mostly to
the bases were loaded. The audience hummed with excitement as the batter stepped up to the plate. After an echoing crack like a thunderclap, the ball whistled right out of the park. The team had won. The batter ran the bases, deafened by the roar of 50,000 fans. If you were thinking hearing, you are correct. We had several clues for that, with the humming of excitement, the crack like a thunderclap, the whistling of the baseball, and the deafening cheers.
Writers use imagery to help their readers imagine something more clearly. But imagery can also be used to create meaning. For example, a writer who wants to show that a character is mean might use imagery of a wolf or a shark when describing the character. To understand the meaning created by imagery, ask yourself, what do these images make me think of? What might the writer be trying to tell me about a character, setting, or event? The streets were dark, except for the dim, greenish light of 2 or 3 street lamps. Wind whistled through empty alleyways and rustled leaves into the gutters. I looked at my map again. Tip for analysis. The images appeal to sight and hearing and make the reader think of a lonely, spooky place. Without saying it directly, the writer is hinting that the character is in trouble. Remember that the type of imagery a writer uses can help you understand the writer's overall meaning. Read the passage and pay attention to what the imagery tells you. What do the images tell you about Devon?
As she listened to the music, Devon's face began to glow. She closed her eyes as the notes danced around her. She waved her fingers back and forth like a tree in the breeze. The rest of the world just disappeared. So if you were thinking she loves music, we had plenty of clues for that, and you are correct.
Often, writers of fiction rely on imagery to describe settings and their effects on characters. Read this excerpt from Edgar Allan Poe's The Pit and the Pendulum. Which senses does Poe's imagery appeal to?
The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. I struggled for breath. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress and stifle me. The atmosphere was intolerably close. So sometimes when we have a hard time using the imagery, it might be because we don't know the vocabulary words. You're going to find that when writers use imagery, it also is going to mean a higher level of word choice. So let's kind of go back and look at that. The blackness of eternal night encompassed me. Encompass means surrounds you. Eternal means forever. So this person is feeling like there's a very dark black night all around them forever. The intensity of the darkness seemed to oppress. That means push down, hold you down, and stifle me. So it means they just can't get out from this darkness. The atmosphere was intolerably close. That means the atmosphere, this feeling of darkness and not being able to breathe, was very close. So now that you know all those vocabulary words, look at the left and think, which two senses does this use? I definitely think sight is one of them, so I'm going to eliminate the bottom two because you can definitely see this blackness of night and just really see almost nothing. I don't feel like I taste anything, so let's go with this one. There you go. Sometimes when you eliminate and you look at that vocabulary, it can help you land on the right selection.
Like writers of fiction, poets use imagery to describe their subjects in colorful detail. For example, consider these lines from Robert Louis Stevenson's poem, Windy Nights. Whenever the trees are crying aloud, and ships are tossed at sea. Which senses do the images in these lines appeal to?
So looking at those two lines, we have trees are crying aloud. Crying and loud appeal to our sense of hearing, And as I see, there is only one suggestion down there with hearing. There you go.
Imagery is language that helps a reader more clearly imagine what a writer is describing. Writers use imagery to unlock a reader's memories of specific experiences. Writers create imagery by using sensory details, words and phrases that appeal to the senses of sight, smell, touch, hearing, or taste. Imagery will often appeal to more than one sense at a time. Imagery can be used to communicate meaning. When reading any descriptive passage, ask yourself, what do these images make me think of? What might the writer be telling me about a character, setting, or event?
So hopefully this helps you understand why writers use imagery and how to identify it. If you slow down when you read these, I'll start that again. If you slow down when you read these novels in verse, I think you're really going to picture them better, enjoy them better. And if you're one of the creative writer types, maybe start trying to use imagery and see if your writing can be just a little bit better.